Howdy everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Pride Month, and that means it's time for a new fun fact about me. You may have figured this out already, but I love to read. I have quite a few favorite authors, but I have to say no one has quite hit my aesthetic on the head like Tamsin Muir, the author of the Locked Tomb saga. I have been following the series since the release of Harrow the Ninth. And let's just say, I'm normal and cool about the series, and I don't make every single person who wants to be my friend read it. Back in 2021, I actually made a Gideon doll, and I really loved how she turned out, even though it was a more simple project than I would usually do. I felt like the simplicity did her character justice, but you wanna know who isn't simple? Harrowhark Nonagesimus. I am obsessed with her. I've said it once, and I'll say it probably at least 30 more times. I support women's wrongs. Of course, Harrow also has never once done anything wrong in her whole life, thank you. With my deep love of Harrow, problematic women, and sickeningly small details in mind, let's get to it. I decided to use this ever after high doll body for this project. I can't for the life of me remember what I did with her head, but I replaced it with another more serious looking face. It was originally on the doll I used for Gideon, but the severe expression and sharp mold weren't what I had in mind for her. As you can see, we're jumping right into working on the body. As usual, I am blushing the doll. The video seems to have increased the saturation on the chalk blushing quite a bit. I promise it's not that stark in real life. I also kind of had this doll in the works for a while, which is why you're not getting to see any of the prep work for the body and face. Next, I move on to the face-up. I was really excited for this because where Gideon has a more simplified skull, Harrow has a lot of fine details. Wow, just like their characters. It's almost like it was on purpose. I love media literacy. I referenced both the book cover and real skull pictures to start to get the details here. To really get the contrast, I came in with black acrylic and laid down the darkest shades around the eyes, lips, and cheeks. Then, I pulled out my watercolor pencils and pastels to do the smaller details and shading so the stark parts would blend properly into the face-up. This face-up is going to take some time, which means that I've got you all trapped here. I assume that if you've watched this far, you're a fan of the books, but if not, let me give you a no-spoilers quick pitch. Gideon the Ninth is about necromancers, and they are in space. They have swords. Some of them have guns, but most of them have swords. Gideon is a loser jock lesbian trying to escape indentured servitude by joining the military. Instead, she ends up traveling with her childhood bully to participate in the world's worst murder mystery at God's old house while trying to become immortal saints. If that summary doesn't sound appealing to you, I don't know what to tell you. It would work on me, obviously. I would inject this series into my veins if I could. I started it back in 2020 and I've never recovered. I know today is the last day of Pride Month, but I wanted to talk about the way in which this book is special to me. The queerness in this book is incredibly casual. It's not a coming out story. It's just an insane sci-fi novel where the characters happen to be queer. And if I'm being honest, that's my personal preference for most of my reading. It's refreshing, and it's not a traditional love story either, or at least not a traditional romance, though I do think that the core of the story is love and all its horrors. Not to go off on a tangent, but it's queer in a lot of ways that fan works are queer, and I think it's delightful to see traditional publishing having finally made room for queer stories that aren't just coming out stories or romances. Not that those aren't awesome and amazing as well, but sometimes it's just nice to read a book where characters are queer, but it's not the center of the narrative. With all that said, the face-up is nearly done. I love how this came out. So serious. Truly a character about to have so many mental breakdowns. After the face-up, I pulled out the fabrics I wanted to use for the project. The geometric square one is a fabric I used for Gideon's outfit. I wanted to make them match on some level. The others are a little more complicated, and I thought they would be fitting of the Reverend Daughter. The shiny purple reminds me of stained glass, but it's still mostly black, so I thought it would work well. The other fabrics I ended up not using in favor of a black lace I later found in my stocks. I cut out all my pieces and then sewed them together. First we have this sweater piece made out of the matching Gideon fabric. Then I paired it with these pants. These are scavenged from another doll and fit pretty well. I also pulled these leg bracers and shoes. I thought the bracers might work well if I painted them white, but I ended up not liking the look of them with the sculpted parts I do later. Finally, there's the jacket, lace cloak, veil, and collar piece. I set aside the outfit to finish later. Next is the most time-consuming part of this project, the sculpting. I used air dry clay and took the tiniest pieces I could and began to sculpt them. I won't make you watch the whole thing. Just know that it took hours and there ended up being almost 181 tiny little pieces. The next most tedious task was to take all the tiny bones and sew them into the jacket. This was a long and arduous process. I decided to tack them down in 2 places each. I wish I had handled this a bit differently. I think if I could go back and do it again, I would have tacked them down with a bit of glue first and then sewed them into place so that they wouldn't move at all. I do still have small issues with a couple of bones where they come loose a little too easily for my liking. Ultimately, this is art and not a toy anymore, so it doesn't move around all that much. Still, I'd like it to have been more secure. I think that I would also use a different type of air dry clay for this project if I had the chance to redo it. This particular clay is super light and is strong on big projects, but I found it to be fairly delicate on the little pieces. I lost a couple of teeth and vertebrae when I tried to poke needles through them to string them into the belts later. That's the way projects like this are, though. Experimental. I'll have a better idea for next time. Once the bones are in place, I applied a white lace to the inside to hide my stitches, but also to add a little more frivolous detail to the jacket. This is one of the big centerpieces of the doll to me. It has all the shine of a stained glass window with the iridescent purple and blue, but the bones help it keep with that truly gothic look. It's a phenomenal fabric. I think it's a Yaya Han. I'm fairly sure I bought a 1/4 yard of this many years ago when it was on sale, specifically for doll projects like this. I also took the time to sew in bones on the sleeves of this jacket. I wasn't initially sure I was going to do this, as I thought it might be too busy. But then I remembered this is a go big or go home kind of project. The more bones, the better. Also, I was very committed to using everything I'd taken the time to sculpt, so I was trying to put them everywhere I could to excuse the effort. It's time to move on to the next big sculpt, the bone corset. I knew air dry clay wasn't going to have the removability I wanted, so instead I pulled out my scrap cosplay materials. This is a scrap of thermoplastic. I heat it up with a hairdryer and apply it to the body so it wraps around tight and fits exactly to the doll's torso measurements. Thinking back, I do wish I'd put a layer of saran wrap or something between the doll and the thermoplastic. It didn't stick or anything, but I did notice some scratching to the paint job. Regardless, there are several nice things about this. But the biggest is that it will have an exact fit and remain flexible in a way a lot of prop pieces that come with dolls do. As long as it isn't completely closed in the back, this can stretch to be removed and reapplied as many times as I need it to. Once I've got the base shape, I take it off the body and begin to mark out and cut it down to size. I make sure I like the silhouette of the corset and then reapply it to the doll. Once it is back on the doll, I pull out a sharp needle and begin to carve the design of the bones into the corset while it is applied. I then remove, flatten, and cut those pieces out. I once again apply it to the doll, heat it up to manipulate it a couple of more times, and then I'm satisfied with it. I use a hot needle to put holes in the back so I can string a thread through and sell the illusion that it's pulled tight. There's only one step left in the bone corset, and that is to paint it. I go in with a white acrylic and lay down a couple of layers. I also paint the shoes black at this time. While it's drying, I tackle the hair. I already had a decent amount of black hair wefts from another project, so I just used them. Using Mod Podge, I apply the hair wefts in rows on the head and make sure everything lays flat and all glue is covered. Once the doll has its hair, it's time for the haircut. Boom! A little pointy and a lot cute. It definitely has the book cover's length. Finally, it's time to assemble all the pieces of the doll. Sweater and pants first. Then the coat. Man, look at all those bones. Let's add some more. So many. The corset goes on next. I made little belts and hanging pieces with the excess bones. They add even more flair to the costume in my opinion. For the final bit, I added the collar and cloak. I made a couple of last-minute bone accessories, like her headpiece that keeps her veil on, and some drapery, but the doll is basically finished, which means it's time for the photo shoot. And you know, I had to bring them both along. Harrow turned out beautifully, and despite the length of time between making these two dolls, they worked together well. Also, please ignore the wrong watermark on these photos. I completed this doll a while back and intended to publish the photos under my original Instagram handle, but I ended up changing things around. I promise it's me. I mean, if that wasn't clear from the fact that I have all the video of me making the doll. I now have matching dolls for my bookshelf display. Bro, chill, we have two hands. I wish I could make a Nona doll, but I don't think I have another of the same body, nor do I have any idea of how to replicate the head. Though I could probably find a different head to put on that would work. It would be fun to have all three of them, especially since I already have plans for Electo.
Get back! Drop another diss track, and my life is yours!
No, but seriously, look at her. She's going to be perfect. I'm just waiting for the official design so I can let it influence me. So look forward to that project as soon as we have it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you had a wonderful Pride Month. Until the next video, stay safe, stay happy, stay cool. Catch you on the flip side.